welcome to the Kolbecast, episode 276. Thank you for joining us. Today we ask one of our team members to step forward from behind the scenes to join Bonnie and I on the Kolbecast. We're happy to introduce Gwynith DeMonte to our Kolbecast audience. A Kolbe Academy teacher who has homeschooled herself, Gwyneth is a recent Thomas Aquinas College grad and newly married. She's also my daughter. I always enjoy hearing her perspective on a variety of subjects, and I think you'll enjoy them as well. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Hi, Stephen. How are you?
Doing well. Really looking forward to a conversation today with one of my, probably going to be my favorite guest ever on the Kolbe. Well, okay, not exactly, because my wife has been on the Kolbecast before, so I think she has to be, well, anyway.
So there's a special category, not guests. These are Kolbecast team members and friends of the Kolbecast. So they have their own special place among us here. So
Yes.
How's that? Is that better?
It's that you're saving me, Bonnie.
Mm-hmm.
That's much better, actually.
Yeah. So as we're about to reveal, or has already been revealed in the introduction, we're introducing a newish Kolbecast team member. We're introducing to our listeners today. She's not so new to Kolbe Academy, though, having served the school in various ways for a while now. And for the past year or so, which hardly seems possible, she's been the one writing the descriptive parts of our show notes. So listeners, I would like to introduce Mrs. Gwyneth DeMonte. Hi, and welcome to the Kolbecast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be recording live with you. Yeah, I feel like I already know so much about your conversations because I always am listening in, obviously, to write the show notes. So it's fun to be here live rather than just, seeing the finished product.
Well, it's about time, and that's not on you. That's on me. Like we have that. Just as I was going back through and realizing how long you've been working with us on the Kolbecast, I realized it was coming up on a year, and I was like, my goodness, how have we not introduced Gwyneth to everybody and gotten to know you? I mean, longtime listeners may remember when we relaunched the Kolbecast about 5 years ago. My sister Hope, who's a Kolbe alumna, was writing the episode descriptions at that time. I tend to still be the link hunter gatherer for the show notes, but someone else, Hope and now Gwyneth, write the descriptive parts of them to tell everybody what they're in for when they queue up an episode. So you're not a guest; you're a part of our team here. But we are going to approach you as we ask everyone making their Kolbecast debut. Would you tell us about yourself and your background and your Kolbe connection?
Yeah, so I live up in Seattle right now with my husband of 1 month, 1 month today, actually. So
Wow.
Newly married. But yeah, I grew up homeschooling. Obviously, my dad is on this podcast and my mom, Maggie, is on occasionally. So that probably gives you a good sense for our family and our feelings about homeschooling and our background. But yeah, I was homeschooled not through Kolbe, but my siblings have all done Kolbe. And honestly, I'm always a little bit jealous. They definitely have some perks that I didn't have access to. So, but I love that for them. And I've been working for Kolbe actually for about 4 years now, I want to say. I joined them as sort of a student teacher, and I helped them a lot when they were launching their asynchronous courses and then revamping those. I've also done some work with my mom in the curriculum development department, and occasionally some graphic design things too. I was worried today that I don't know if any middle schoolers would be happening to listen, but if they took middle school English, they might be triggered right now because they hear my voice every week in their lectures. That's the woman who's making me learn English.
They're excited. They're like, oh, I know her.
Hopefully it's that. But yeah, and this year I'm teaching live online for the first time. So I'll be teaching Literature 8 and French 1 and 2. I'm really excited about.
Oh, goodness. Okay. I can't believe it's been 4 years. What has happened to time? So as a grown-up homeschooler now, what standout memories do you have of your homeschooling days or years?
And that is such a fun question for me. I loved homeschooling when I was really little. I have so many great memories of that, probably ages like 4 through 7, I would say, because I remember we would always start the day with breakfast at 7, and then I would do all my schoolwork. And at that stage, I would obviously rely on my mom a lot to help me with some of the assignments, but there were a couple things I could do semi-independently. I remember that was really exciting when I got to that stage, and I was like, "Oh, I can teach myself math. That's pretty cool." And I loved that, I do my schoolwork, and because we're homeschooled, we finished way earlier than all the kids who were stuck inside in school. And then I would just play outside. I spent so much time like at the top of our rope, and I'd like sit up on the tree and just kind of look all over. And it was really fun. I also, once I got older then, and I'm the oldest, so I have a lot of little siblings. That was also something that I really treasured, because then I would sort of structure my day around babysitting them, which I think is something a lot of homeschooling families do. The older ones help out with the younger ones to kind of make the day work. And that was so much fun for me too, because I felt like my day was always like interspersed with, time with my siblings. And I never felt like I was so bogged down in work. I did have, of course, days when I was, really plodding through schoolwork. Those were sometimes fun, sometimes less fun, but I really, really enjoyed that.
Hmm.
I also took some online classes too, although not through Kolbe, but those are probably, I remember, I think it was fifth grade. I was doing some of my first big kid online classes where, you're interacting with the teacher a lot more, and you have papers. And I was like, I'm grown up now. I was like, this is pretty much what college is like. I was like, I'm pretty sure I could do college now. And at 10 years old, I was, filled with self-confidence, but it was a really great experience for me.
Yeah, I think I remember one of your first classes that was kind of with an outside the home teacher was a French course, I think. That
That's right.
I remember you were taking this, you had the basic course, but then you would speak to this teacher that was in Paris and work on your French pronunciation, which stands
Yeah,
out.
that's right. I remember she was so intimidating at first. I was like, this lady, her standards are too high. She doesn't know I live in California. That's what I thought at the time. I think I was probably like, yeah, 5 or 6. And I was like, what is she expecting from me? I don't live in France. But then I very quickly got into it, and then really came to value her expertise, and even her strict discipline of, say it again, say it again, say it again. You didn't get it right. But yeah, then it came to really pay off. So that was a very cool experience.
I think I do remember. I mean, it always made me this story always made me happy when you we were visiting friends in Austria and you were trying to speak in the Austrian German that they had to try to do some things. And I think they asked you whether you were from France, whether that was
I know
so.
that
It's like,
is a funny thing. People have told me that anytime I try to speak another language, it comes out sounding vaguely French, and I think that's because my mom started us all on languages very young, and so I started French very young, and then now in my head it's just foreign language. Everything gets kind of permeated with a French accent. But yeah, I remember visiting our friends in Austria, and I was ordering fried chicken and potatoes. Um, Something like Bakun meat depot salad or something like that. And she's like, here's how you say it. Waiter came by and I said it, and he just kind of chuckled. And then I was like, did I say it wrong? What's going on? And she was like, oh, actually you said it like someone from France. So he thinks that's kind of funny because you're American. Um, but yeah, I guess maybe I don't know if that's a common experience. I feel like it surely must be, but it is kind of funny. I feel like I get to trick people when I'm in places other than France.
Keep him guessing.
Exactly.
Impressive.
and you were recently in France for a little bit. How did that? Did, I know you said in the southern France the language is pretty different, but you've been doing French now for a very long time, and you're teaching it. So did it go pretty well when you were in northern France, at least in Paris and such?
Yeah, northern France and honestly even southern France was pretty great, although they do have the Occitanie, which my husband speaks Spanish, and it's very close to Spanish, so he actually was the better communicator if they were speaking Occitanie, which was, yeah, that was really interesting. So they had some dialects variation once we got right up against the Spanish border there. But in Paris, that was really great. Definitely helpful for going to France. Since it's always a joke with French people that they're snobs a little bit about their language, and they're like, uh, they really want the Americans to speak with a good accent if you're going to be there. It's the worst is if you don't speak any French at all, and it's pretty bad if you speak French badly. But if you speak it okay, then they'll give you your water and let you get what you want at the restaurant. But yeah, that was definitely really helpful, and also because we're both such nerds, frankly. We wanted to go to so many museums, and it was so helpful for me to be able to read the plaques and be like, oh, that's what this is, and this is when it came here. And yeah, so at the Louvre, I really appreciated it.
Would be handy.
I also, well, so as I'm thinking through other homeschooling memories, I remember your journalism that you were really interested in too, and your opportunity to this was with our other school, but to put things together and get to go out to the East Coast campus of TAC to interview people and all sorts of extra things that it's like that would never happen for me in my little public school in rural Wisconsin. So
I know that was probably one of my favorite things in high school was doing that journalism course. And I know Kolbe has their Kolbe News Show, which looks like so much fun. But yeah, we went to journalism conventions, which was great, down in the LA area, which was a little bit of a drive, but only a few hours, so nothing to complain about. And that was just such a great experience. I feel like that really taught me the most about writing of any course I've ever taken, and to read with a more critical eye, which I think was hugely helpful. And also, yeah, I was lucky to get a really great journalism teacher. So that made everything really wonderful as well, just because she was so passionate about it, and really made that so engaging for us. Yeah, I highly recommend journalism to people now, even for people who are not at all interested in it. So when I'm tutoring students, just because the grammar and the writing skills and the critical reading skills are so helpful just for life. I feel like that's one of the skills I come back to the most often, which I feel like is not the class you might expect to come into play the most, but definitely has been for me.
yeah, and I certainly remember a lot of the tips that you were giving me through those. I mean, both about like write a different style of writing where you have to like tell people in the first right up front what's going on. So that and just kind of what a journalist should be doing because I read the Wall Street Journal or online just about every day, and I can from that since as I was thinking about that is so many articles today are clearly opinion articles, but they're presented as journalism. So they're just throwing in a lot of stuff, and you think, hey, you're not being, objective here. You're not trying to present this. You're presenting it with a slant. I remember talking to you about that though, and you were going through those. It's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was in that class too that I picked up some photography and graphic design, which is obviously important to journalism. Every story leads with a big picture, so you have to know how to take a picture that's going to catch people's attention, and put together a nice layout on your page. So that also is something that's been coming into play again and again. I suppose maybe for me more than for most, since I occasionally pick up some graphic design work for Kolbe, and try to pull things together for their books or their online courses. But that's also a really helpful skill that I'm very grateful to, yeah, journalism and Miss Kimberly McCarthy for.
Certainly, we're benefiting from your experience in the area with the show note writing. So grateful for that. I would love to get some Catholic journalists to come talk to us about the
Yeah.
importance of as just as another as we ask like the doctors or whoever else comes on, like what do you suggest for aspiring whatever field,
Yeah.
journalism would be an important one to have, I think. So fingers crossed there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I know. And I've always wanted to ask some of the people who are like so outspokenly Catholic, like Ross do that on the New York Times audio. I'll occasionally catch his show, and I think it's actually a very interesting question to ask them how they view the like intersection of their faith and their journalistic integrity. Because like to some extent, as a Catholic, you do kind of want to write with a slant a little bit. Sometimes you're like, this seems like an objectively, terrible thing, especially if you're writing about some of the more controversial issues. So that's an interesting thing to talk about too. Like, how do they balance that they have like this clear worldview, and also that as a journalist, part of your job is to try and, to some extent, tone that down or leave it out. Um, at least classically, I think that's what the journalist would try to do.
It seems like I don't see this as much these days, but every once in a while, like in the journal, they'll have this investigative journalism sort of thing you, where it's like, this is really cool that somebody is actually digging into something to reveal something or say something that nobody else knows about something. So it could be corruption or these things. And I think of that as being like an investigator or something, something in the criminal system. But it's, I don't know, it's pretty amazing when a journalist is just digging in to find the truth and can bring these things to light, which otherwise nobody would know about.
Yeah. I'm always even more interested in that when it happens with like Substack writers, because at least if you're backed by a journalist company, there's, I would imagine, some level of security there, both in that you have funding and also an organization who can go to court with you. But when you're just an individual person, which is, I think, increasingly where a lot of the investigative journalism is happening, obviously you might have subscriber funding, but if someone's going to get sued for something, it's just going to be you. And so I always really admire those people. That's pretty bold to just be out there and be investigating and really putting, livelihood and career on the line in some of those cases.
So here's probably an opportunity for me to ask one of those intersection of generations because, growing up for me, news was always the nightly news. So and there was only three networks at that point. So it was just and then there was the local newspaper that you could get. Well, for us, it was like once a week, and it was usually about who was visiting their grandparents or whatever in the area, is the big things. But now there's podcasts, like you were mentioning, Substack. So I don't know how to properly ask this question, but how do you see like the new generations getting their information and do you have an opinion about whether it might be better or worse or more dangerous? I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think in my generation, just look it up on YouTube is kind of our like go-to, which is hugely helpful. Just, I mean, we're in the process of getting our apartment set up. There are like countless things that I'm like, I don't know how to fix this appliance, and I've never tried to build this thing before, and YouTube is an amazing resource. But yeah, I think many people in my generation definitely turn to less classical media, although there are still some, I think the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, those are staples among maybe a few others and are still that way. But definitely a lot of people go now to YouTube and podcasts for their information. And I think there is something great about that. I think it's nice insofar as it is more personal in that you tend to have a sense for this personality who's presenting it to you, obviously with varying degrees of authenticity, but you get a sense for their values and how they engage with other people. And I think that's very different. You're really dealing with individuals rather than companies. Even some of the newspapers that have continued to be more successful, I think, really have started to make their writers and contributors much more like forward-facing personalities. At least it seems that way to me. I guess I wouldn't really know, but that's my impression of it. And I think that can be a great thing. I also think it can be a great thing to have so much diversity of information available. I will say the downside is that is so much you have to sift through now. So really, we've gone through sort of the bottleneck that was the traditional news media, which filtered the things for you and presented it to you in a nicely packaged array. Now we just have all of that available to us without the bottleneck, which puts sort of the burden on us to decide what gets through to us and what doesn't. And I do think algorithms can be a tricky question with that because it's designed to hook you in and keep you hooked, but in the process, it is kind of making those filtering decisions for you, which can be, uh, I've often thought that maybe that's not so good of a thing because it is just going to restrict what you get. And so it's easy if you already have a limited viewpoint to limit it even further. Even if you start with a broader viewpoint, you get sucked down the content rabbit hole, then now that's all you're seeing. And I think that can be definitely a challenge.
Very true.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask about that. So you beat me to it. And now I don't know, I'm even at my age, I'm kind of enjoying like the Google AI feature when I now search for something. So this is probably even causing more problems because not only is Google trying to show me what I want to look at, but now it's going to summarize a bunch of stuff. But I like the little links that they have now. Um, so it seems like it's even moving in a step further than just the algorithms. Now you're getting AI with the algorithms. So
Right.
but I think you had mentioned though at one point too that you were with the algorithms. I think that you were saying that you knew that you had to check like different perspectives because if you just let the algorithm show you what you want to see, then
Yeah. There was an independent journalist. I don't remember who it was because this was years ago, but it stuck with me. He said that I think he had multiple different accounts on various platforms and he would exclusively watch very different types of content. So he had it segmented. Like on this platform, he was watching content from this viewpoint, and then on a different account on the same platform, it would be from this other viewpoint, so that he got both spectrums of the algorithm, which I thought was fascinating. But I feel like there's only so much of that you can realistically do. But yeah, it does cater to you so specifically. It's almost frightening.
Yeah.
I didn't expect going in so much into journalism, but I did.
It's interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting, yes, and I knew
Yeah.
you have good thoughts about it. So.
All right. Gwyneth, I would love for you to give our listeners some suggestions on episodes that might be helpful or interesting or enjoyable to them. And maybe we'll break it down into, since we have such a varied audience on the Kolbecast, as you mentioned, students, homeschooling families who have been at it a while or are brand new to it or even still thinking about it. And then lots of folks who come to listen because of the various speakers or topics that we cover. So really wide audience. Um, and so for a couple of those groups, new homeschoolers, they'll start with them. Do you have
Yeah.
maybe a few episodes you would suggest to them to get them started?
Oh, absolutely. I think that for someone who's interested in Colby specifically or classical education, my mom joined the podcast for episodes 256 and 257, and she really dove into not just the methodology behind how do you do classical in pre-K through 12, what does that look like, all those different stages, but she also gave some really helpful specific examples for how they've integrated that. And I think that's really cool to see, not just the general implications of classical education, but specifically how Colby has decided to carry it out. So that's a great starting place. Um, and then I think you should go to Seeking, Finding, and Building Community with Dee Dee and Kristen, because I know that that is something that a lot of homeschooling parents worry about, or parents who are thinking of switching to homeschooling, is how are our children going to find community? And I thought they did a great job of talking about how homeschooling does not have to be a lonely endeavor. It doesn't have to be you alone on a farm, if you don't want it to be. And so some people are lucky they just moved to a place that has amazing co-ops and a vibrant parish, but many people do not. Probably the majority of people do not. And so they did a great job of talking about how you can start that. And that was one of my favorites. They had some great ideas there, even for me, who is not a homeschooling parent, but has just moved to a new community. So it's like, oh, I can start implementing some of that to meet some young Catholics in my area. Um, Reading, that was another one. We had a great reading episode. I think it was called Light Bulb Moments for Young Readers, episode 247. that was another episode that I thought homeschooling parents really need to hear that because teaching reading can be one of those things that I think parents are daunted by. And I always I always think it's a little funny. People are surprised to hear that I didn't read until very late, which because I went to TAC, that's a program you really can't do unless you can read both quickly and well. And I also have my 1,000 page novel next to me that I put down to enjoy this podcast. So clearly I ended up just fine. But I know that a lot of parents, probably my mom and dad could speak to this, that when you're teaching a child who's later to read, there can be moments where you're like, is this normal? Is this not? When do we need to try a different strategy? When do we need to look for other help? So both that one, people do actually work out okay, even if they're slow to read. And two, there's a lot of great advice in there. And then my last one for homeschooling parents would be Caitlin Russ. That's probably one of my favorite episodes. She talked about sensory awareness and problem solving. And she is an occupational therapist. And I think one of the things that really stuck with me in that is she was talking about younger kids and how they are always squirming and moving and can't sit still. And I, again, was thinking back on my childhood. I remember so vividly doing school with my mom in our living room. My brother would stand on his head to do math problems. And if he wasn't on his head, math wasn't happening that day. And I was like, I think that is so great for parents to understand, like, one, the different things that can be going on with their children, but also these very common behaviors that we see can actually be signs of like deeply intricate things that are going on in these children's brains. So I love that episode because I was suddenly like, oh, that makes sense. Like school time was one child was running around the couch, the other one was on his head. And then like I was like, I need to stretch right now, mom. Like if we're doing reading, I have to stretch. And it's just like, oh, that's all just, children, but there's so much more you can go into understanding that and even kind of using that to your advantage, I think. Um, so those are my recommendations for new homeschooling families.
Love it. Those are great. I was taking notes as you were talking. I'll include these in our show notes in the link section. That's the section that I tend to work on. Okay. What do you got for our students?
Absolutely. College prep. That's a good place to start. Episode 230. I remember I was listening to that in the courtyard of our college campus. And I remember thinking this would have been so helpful to know. And I think we did a great job. Like there were some things in there that I knew. Obviously, I made it to college, so one way or another worked out fine. But I remember thinking like it was so clearly laid out. It was like, here's step one. It was a beautiful timeline. And I was like, for students, especially students who are going into high school right now, that is a great episode to listen to because it'll give you step by step, what do you do to get into college, the times you need to be doing everything at. And it's just like an hour of your time. And that information can be so hard to go collect on your own if you don't know where to start. So highly recommend that for students. Then we had a number of college visit episodes, which I think were also really fun. I remember episode 244, a sort of a recap with three students, Bella, Jeremiah, and Gianna, who went to Newman Guide School summer programs. And I love hearing about different experiences that people have at college. And we actually have a number of those too back in the catalog. If you dig through, you can find a lot of mentions of other colleges and people talking about the program and their experience. But for students who, especially since you're homeschooled, you might not have the same capability to travel all over the place to see all the schools you're interested in. So this is going to give you just a little taste and then hopefully something sparks your interest and you can delve into that more. So I love that one. And then the last one I would really highly encourage students to listen to is Super Habits with Dr. Andrew Abella. That was a great episode. I think that was number 226. And he talked about how, as students, there are specific virtues that we can incorporate. He had a great saying somewhere in there. I think he was quoting someone else, but it was like, in the beginning was the word, and the word was no. And he completely turns that on its head and talks about how virtues are not us saying no to things, but us saying yes to things. and the real meanings behind some of those virtues that like temperance or things like that, that maybe we have come to associate with other things in our day and age that actually have slightly different meanings in their most classical sense. And I love this one because at Kolbe we do Virtue of the Month. So Virtue of the Month for September is going to be faith. I was looking over some of the activities for that. We're praying to St. Martha this month. And I was just thinking about that in connection to Dr. Andrews' episode. And I was like, this is exactly what he's talking about. And I think Kolbe does a great job of offering that to students, so we to integrate that and practice it. So for really Kolbe students of any age, that's a great episode to listen to, kind of get them re-inspired for a new year of monthly virtues at Kolbe.
And he has such a fun way of presenting the information, and he's fun to listen to also. So I think all of that, taking all the,
Yeah.
yes, here to that.
Yeah, I was kind of humbled after having him on as a guest. I enjoyed reading his book, and I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to go straight to the Summa and read all of. And I started paging through the Summa, and it's like this is going to take me a very long time to go through all of these. But he's got it all broken down, and yeah, it's just that was a fun one.
Yeah, I agree. Are there other groups of listeners and episode recommendations for them?
Yeah, I definitely found a lot of benefit in those lists of podcasts I just mentioned, but I feel like I'm not quite in the target demographic for either of those right now. So I wanted to mention a few other ones that I think just have very broad appeal. Monsignor James Shea came on the podcast, and he is just a great speaker. He really, you can sort of sense the spirituality coming off of him, even through the audio. And so I just love starting the year with that one. That was one of the earlier ones I listened to, I think. And so that was a great way to start off. I was like really energized after that. Um, I also loved Joan Watson talking about sort of the spirit of pilgrimage, which is something that I've been trying to foster this year since. I mean, I did actually get to go see some pilgrimage sites in France, which is pretty awesome, but I'm moving to a new area and kind of experiencing new churches for the first time. And it's been a really fun way to sort of explore my faith in viewing things as even pilgrimages from my own home. Let me find a new saint and learn about them and pray to them and treat it like it's a pilgrimage. And that's been so great for me. So I'm really a huge fan of that. And then we've had so many great episodes with people who speak so well about mental health and have very different methodologies and approaches. We did have on Art and Lorraine Bennett. That was really great. They talked about the temperaments, which I think is super fascinating, both as like a sort of historical concept and also as a framework for talking about your own experience. And then, of course, the Pop Checks, who are pretty well known in the Catholic podcasting world. And I thought they had some great advice and insight to share. And then I also just had to give a shout out to Belinda Mooney, who is a social worker in her past and turned homeschooling parent. And she, again, I feel like that might have been an episode that in some ways I think new homeschooling parents might be in the target audience and really benefit from that, but she is just so much fun to listen to. So I love that episode. It's one I return to from time to time just because I just like love hearing Belinda speak. So
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So with some of the mental health things that you were mentioning, it's one of the things that I'm not sure. I probably maybe I should have asked you this before in an earlier time, but is this something in our family? I think it's more just a newer thing because like there's an awareness of overall health and mental health in particular. It seems like in your generation and the younger people that really wasn't there. I mean, that I'm having to discover at a much older age, it seems like. Do you think it's just a change in generations, or is it something more particular to our family?
yeah, I think that's a broad generational shift because I think my generation, Gen Z, we have been much more open about mental health things. And I think it's definitely a stereotype, or maybe a true one, that we have weird memes and they're all about our mental problems. Um, and I think that might be kind of true. And there's kind of a sort of just laid back, not flippant, but just, like it's very open. And I have definitely noticed that with my own friend groups, where it's not uncommon for someone to just, start talking about their mental issues and how they're experiencing it that day. Whereas I feel like definitely from, even when I was a little bit younger, experiencing how adults talked about it and how I still experience some adults now, seems like that is still a little bit strange to a lot of people, especially in older generations, that a casual topic of conversation with your friends might be how everyone is doing in the mental health field at the moment. And that, I think, is something that's pretty prevalent in my generation and further down, which has probably had a lot of broader implications on the culture as well.
It seems like, at least in my generation, when you start talking about mental health, it's like, okay, did I fail in some way? There's this stigma with, hey, if I don't have everything together, it's my fault and there's something wrong with me, rather than here's maybe a lot of that it's like the cognitive behavioral therapy reframing, looking at things, which seems like a relatively newer way of approaching things than, yeah, certainly than when I was growing up. Maybe it was around when I was growing up, but never heard about those things.
Yeah, I think part of that too, I'm not qualified to speak on this, but as an armchair reader of scientific studies, I have noticed definitely when I'm looking back at the literature that it seems like really recently we have had so many breakthroughs in mental health and our understanding of how things are passed on genetically and how different drugs and chemicals can interact with your brain chemistry. So I feel like there's so much more just going on in science right now to understand how things are actually passed down, what things are sort of within your control and not, and how different habits can impact people, that I think maybe some of that was just lacking before too, either in the research or in the accessibility of the research, such that you just didn't really have the ability to sort of easily access that information as to how things can be passed out.
I think neuroscience is, since the 2000s, has really kind of come about too. So that's with all of the things there. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful that we get to have all the conversations we have had so far and hope for more to come about just making that as much a part of life and the things we tend to, where our attention goes, as some of the other aspects of the academic choices we make or medical, all that sort of stuff. I'm glad it's more a part of the conversation.
Yeah. And I think podcasting has really sort of been at the forefront of that shift too, when you have people like Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's a professor at Stanford, who has a podcast where he's breaking down scientific literature, or Dr. Peter Attia, who's authored many studies and podcasts to explain it. And it is kind of funny because those are both, sort of pop science, but pretty sciencey pop science, that are available to the public. And I'm always surprised, I guess, by how much all of my peers listen to that. Where I'll just be like, I'll casually mention, but I heard this. And they're like, oh, was that this episode? Because I was listening to that. And it seems like it's just kind of everywhere now.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Majors is kind of my hero here from our Kolbecast guests that we've had. And then like I'll listen to his podcast and he's talking about all these books. Well, actually, I partially read books because he recommends them. And then you delve in and find all this interesting information that, yeah, there's just so many things you can, yeah. So it's really amazing to be able to have easy access to all of that without.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite things about the podcast, about podcasting in general. It's when you can be part of conversations that that would not have happened otherwise,
Yeah. Yeah, because as you're saying that, I was like thinking of some of these people, if we were to listening to them before the era of podcasts, it'd probably be like, I'm going to go listen to them give a lecture about this particular topic. And normally when they're doing that, it's for a different audience than the casual observer or somebody new to it. But yeah, the podcast with the conversational style and just sitting down and chatting really kind of opens up something. And then I can always go and dig deeper later, you know what I mean? But it's really lovely.
Hmm. So, Gwyneth, are there things that you would like to hear coming up on the Kolbecast?
Oh, that is such a great question. Um, it is back to school season, and so I'm always a huge fan of study tips. I think that was one of the things I loved about Caitlin Russ's episode is that in addition to just talking more generally about sort of children and their experience of learning, she also had some pretty concrete, action items to sort of use your brain in your favor when it comes to managing distractions and focusing and memory. So I'm always a big fan of that, especially because I'm teaching languages this year. I'm looking for ways to help my students kind of optimize their memory storage. Um, but yeah, that would probably be a big one for me. And I've always loved our sort of faith-focused episodes. I think we always do a great job on the Kolbecast of bringing that to all of our listeners with really inspiring speakers. So I always look forward to those. I feel like they're little mini retreats for me on like a Saturday morning. I can listen to that and feel like I'm, nourishing my soul and hearing great speakers. So excited for those too.
On prior episodes, I've talked about the Highlands Ability Battery with this test that I give to people. And just recently, I had a couple of students reach out and ask to take it. So I've kind of been delving back in and thinking, oh yeah, all of these different techniques even are different customized ways of learning to try to figure out, okay, if I'm weak in this area, how can I use these to help me, you know, better retain the information that I'm getting? So yeah, maybe we can come up with something with
Yeah.
study.
I would love to hear more about learning styles too, because I'm actually helping design a high school course right now. It's a writing course for Kolbe. And one of the things we're doing there is talking about different outlining methods and brainstorming methods people can use for their writing. And we're dividing it according to learning style, which I think is really interesting. So if you're more spatially oriented, you love a diagram, here's some for you. You're very logical, linear thinking. These are some for you. You feel like you need to constantly like word vomit, talk everything out. This is how you should be outlining. And I was like, you know what? I think that is so helpful because definitely I've seen that students learn very differently. But also, it can be hard for the students themselves to sometimes pick up on what they learn best or how they learn best. Because they're like, well, I can read and I can talk. And so I kind of learn in both ways. And so I think having some information for them about identifying their learning style and some of that Highlands Ability Battery-esque, how do they process things? I think that's super helpful information for students and probably for parents too, who are trying to figure out how to teach their own children.
Yeah. I was thinking that too. On the parent side, it's been my experience that it's like, oh, this is interesting about myself. It's coming. I didn't realize it before as I have been going through this with the kids that this is kind of how I best approach things, or really, this does not go well for me. I'm not so great. This is not my strength, or having to um, take in this information in this way is more challenging to me than in another way, or I don't know. Do you have any tips for high school students who are embarking upon the Kolbe courses or somewhere in the middle of them?
Yeah, I mean, going to TKC, we spend, a lot of time in our education reading those original works of literature from, each of those different eras. And I would say they can be very challenging. They are not all easy reads to get into, and there's a lot of intricacies behind what was happening historically and politically at those times that drove those movements in literature and philosophy. So for students who are specifically in the, literature, history, philosophy, things in high school, I would say just be patient and do not expect that you'll get everything out of it the first time because those works are not intended to be one-time reads in your life. They're meant to be revisited again and again. The Iliad was meant to be performed in such a way that you would see it many times in your life, and each time different things would strike you. And so I think that's really worth knowing. And then for students in general, I think I'm always encouraging my students at the start of the year to just come talk to me, because I think all of our teachers here at Kolbe, the best part of our job is really just working with those students and solving problems for them. That is the most rewarding thing as a teacher. And I just finished up teacher training. So I'm seeing all of our teachers go out so energized, and they all have these huge plans for how they want to help everyone this year and develop even more resources. So if you have a Kolbe teacher, you really lucked out, because they are so motivated to help you. And that's so evident. So I would definitely just encourage students to reach out, because now that I've gotten to know these people, I can promise you they are ready and eager to lend you a hand.
Fabulous. Are there things we haven't gotten to yet that you wanted to?
I feel like we have covered pretty much everything. I do always want to give a plug for Asynchronous, because that is what I've worked on the longest. And we have done so much revamping of that course over the summer, of all of those asynchronous courses. So they are going to be much more polished this year. They're really beautiful. Our format is continually being refined, and I'm so excited because I've done these for a few years, and we've made a couple of changes over those years. And I think this year things are really coming together in such an exciting way. And so, yeah, I would give a little plug for those. The benefit of asynchronous is that you can do essentially have all the resources of an online class, but without all the deadlines. You still get teacher feedback, grading, commentary. I'm always available in my courses by email. I can set up office hours, but there's no live class, and you work at your own pace if you want to. So it's a pretty great tool for students who are already pretty overwhelmed in their online class schedule, but they still want a little more support than they would get in the traditional homeschool format. So definitely something to check out, because it's looking really good this year.
Sounds good. Okay. Any final thoughts or takeaways you want to leave with us?
Everyone should listen to the Kolbecast and subscribe and download.
Amen. Amen. Well, our show notes, as always, are going to have Gwyneth's lovely descriptions of what the episode is about, along with our laundry list of links and Kolbecast episodes that are relevant to our conversation today. It has been lovely visiting with you and having you. This is the first of many conversations, I am sure. So it's great to have you on mic with us. Thank you so much for all of the work you've done behind the scenes, Gwyneth. We're very glad to have you among us here on the Kolbecast team. And thanks for spending this time with us.
Thank you guys so much. It is the most fun part of my job. So
Good.
Subscribe to the Kolbecast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Ignatius of Loyola, holy saints and angels, pray for us. Ad maiorem Dei gloriam.